name is Dr. Garfield Alexander, and this is my story. I'm a district medical officer in District East. District starts from Keys, ends in Sadlers. And what I basically do is I work in the community, do 2 clinics, Sadlers Clinic, Molyneux Clinic. But I share the entire district with another doctor, which extends to Keon Clinic and Tabernacle Clinic, which I'm not in charge of. There's a hospital, a cottage hospital, Mary Charles Hospital, which we share again. And my duties are covering the hospital for casualty and dealing with any patients that might be hospitalized. Well, my family's from the village, but we moved out of the village, and I think I was still a child. Grew up in Market Street, then we moved to McKnight. So the days where basically I grew up Market Street, then McKnight. I had the advantage of growing up in an extended family for the early part of Market Street, where there were aunts, cousins, and I think that enriched my perspective and my life a lot, because then you understood that the importance of not only a family but the extended family. And I think I had more to fall back on. I wouldn't have to rely on just a mother. I always had an aunt that was close by, and I think it enriched my adult life now because I have a good relationship with most of my extended family. I think there was more of a sense of community when I was growing up. For example, there were a lot of elderly around that people respected. I think there's been a paradigm shift in St. Kitts in that. Before, when I was growing up, I got the perspective that even if you didn't have financial wealth, house, money, you still were respected by being hardworking, by being honest. You would hear your parents say, that man worked all his life, or that man is an honest man. So that was something you were respected for. So even if they had persons who got money by devious means, some people would just not align with them, would not even accept the money from them. I think that has changed a lot in St. Kitts. Well, I got plenty of licks. I think I was, back in the day, we call it abstinent. I was a very abstinent child. I think a lot of people I grew up with would never thought I'd have been a doctor today, because that was the extent of my deviousness. But I think one of the main things I think would stand out is I remember going to kindergarten in boys' school for the first time and leaving preschool and thinking that school was just taking too long and it was just not fun anymore. And I just left the schoolyard, and as I tell you, I was living in Market Street, so I just walked it over the gut, through the alley, up to Market Street. And I remember just instinctively saying good morning to my neighbor, and thought nothing about it. I went in. My mother came home and asked me how come I was home so early, and I lied. I told her I was, I don't remember what lie I told, but I didn't tell her I came home from school early. But she had already found out from the neighbor that I was there early. I remember getting like a severe beating for that. And growing up, I just couldn't skip classes. It was just, and I even skipped school. Even when I was sick, I felt guilty. Ever since that, I think the next time I skipped classes might have been sixth form. After that, that's all. The thing I've learned about lessons is that you learn a lesson in the moment of the lesson, and it's kind of more lessons are added because I think I learned that you shouldn't lie, and I guess the pain instructed that to me. But at the same time, I didn't see, I knew that I did something wrong, and I think that's what happened too, because now there's a whole issue about whether you should corporal punishment, whether you should beat. But I don't remember ever getting licks or getting beaten for a reason that wasn't so. And looking back on it, the experience, I think I took a valuable lesson. So now we have parents that say beat, some that say don't beat, find other ways. I think each home is a cell, and you have to find your way. Once it's not aggressive beating, because I think a lot of parents take out the frustration on children. You come home, mouths to feed, like it's eye spearing at you, no money there, you get frustrated, and the least thing happen, then you kind of vent your frustration on the children. No, it wasn't my experience, but I think I saw it within the neighborhood. How I feel about it? I guess it created a map for me. Now I try as much as possible in dealing with my daughter, because I have a 7-year-old, in trying to be as patient as possible. Sometimes it doesn't work, but most times I tend not to beat unless, well, not in the moment. Cool down, talk it over. What we have is a kind of relationship where if I see her bending the rules, most times I complain it to her mother, and then she do the punishing, and vice versa. Try to put ways and means, because sometimes we might just act out. It's just human nature. But we have to understand that a lot of times our children, we tend to say a lot and instruct a lot, but a lot of times it's the best sermon is an example. Too much examples to mention, to list, because I'm strange in that I think that my heroes don't have to have capes, and my heroes don't have to be doctors, and my heroes don't have to be lawyers. I tend to see characteristics and personalities that I like and admire them and try to be like them. And then when I attain that level there, I'll move on. So just for the time being, somebody might be my hero and then they're not. For me, it's very transient. It's strange, and I guess I'm strange like that. I think for me the paradigm shift started maybe in the late 90s, where you just started to see things that I didn't find customary, I didn't find the social norm. Like, for example, I told you before that persons had what I like to call social currency, where they were valued not because of economics, they were valued because of the honesty, the personality, character traits, and you didn't have to have a house, a home, money to be respected. But now it's as if you could buy your respect. You don't necessarily have to earn it. If you respect it because of the car you drive, you respect it because of how much money you have or the power and influence you have. Respect comes more from there, because I always garnered respect, but that respect seems to come much more from there. And for me, that's a paradigm shift. And I think there's a moral issue. I think there's a moral issue in the whole world. It's not just St. Kitts, it's not just the Caribbean, it's everybody in the whole. You see it in the television, you see it in music. Things that we wouldn't speak of before have become the norm in songs. You go to a movie, you hardly ever see cowboys and Indians or policemen being the star. It's always the robber, the thief. So everything has shifted. So there's more of a glorification of bad, a glorification of gangsterism. So those are some of the shifts I've seen. Most definitely, that paradigm shift had a big push in what we see now with the youth and violence. But I think apart from that, even before that, there's been a destruction of what I term community. And I guess it started with the family, because the family is the unit of society. In that, first, we don't have a lot of fathers that are playing the roles, so that's fundamental in breaking up the family unit. Families don't meet together like before, sit down and eat. Like dinner time was a family group, and you had to be a part of it. Everybody shared. That has changed a lot. People come and they snack here, they snack there, or even if the mother cooks, somebody takes at one point, somebody takes at another point. There's no communion like before. But mainly you don't have much communities. Like for me, and people get upset when I say it, but I think Sandy Point is the only real community that I have in St. Kitts now. Newtown, maybe half so. Keon was still trying. Village. You could look at the communities. Like There must, for you to have a community, there must be volunteerism. There must be people doing things just for the sake of the community, for no self-gain. A lot of our communities are dependent on politicians and dependent on, because we like to use the loose term government to encompass all that. There's a lot of dependency. Before, as a community, you'd find a family or family member would get sick, he would look first to family, then friends, maybe the church, and then later on neighbors, community, extended, and then it might reach to government or civil society at that point. Now, anything happens to anybody, and the first thing they're looking for is government or a politician. It's direct to them. So there's no more interdependency because there's so much more individualism. I can't really speak towards a why. The world shifts like that, and that's where they have superpowers that fail and then others come up. The world just shifts like that. There's a lot of individualism. The internet, again, I think maybe might have had something to do with it, where everybody could Google, everybody has their own computer, everybody seeks their own information. Before, for you to get information, you'd have to interact with somebody else. Go to a library, go to a book, go to somebody who had wisdom or knowledge. Now, it's there at your fingertip. Is what we see as development. A lot of what we call development and empowerment is based on individualism. If we can, we will have to, because we're teetering on the brink of all that's bad. So by I would say natural forces, we're gonna move back to that, because it can come to a point where things are gonna get so bad that we're gonna have to rely on each other. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. The reason why I say it's going to get worse before it gets better is because if families are failing, and by extension we see our communities failing, then the nation is soon after. There's no nation without communities and without families. So if those two prerequisites are failing, then slowly we're going to see that. You're seeing it now, where people have less national pride. There's more of a sense of what's for me. There's no more sense of country, and then you see it extended into our sports. Because if our young men don't feel pride about our nation, they can go out and give their heart and souls. So that's why you see, with sport, we're just not excelling as we used to be. We see our music, people complain about the bands. When we had, a world-renowned musician like Ellie Matt in the jazz bars. We had persons leaving here, going to the VI, going to St. Martin, and establishing world-renowned bands. We see the failings of our nation nowadays. We're just not being as productive as possible. Because I think it has reached to the point where, as a nation, we've done everything for our populace. Now is what our populace can do for us. We have healthcare, education. Everything seems to be there, but people have to start putting out their hands and see what they could do for this country now. At least that's my perspective. I don't think there's too much, but I think we have enough. You're better than this. I wouldn't say it needs to be a paradigm shift, because we don't control paradigm shifts. Can't say we don't, because marketing giants do that all the time. But I think we just need to understand the worth of community. And we can't do that by the older heads just gaining this nostalgic mode and just reminiscing on the past. Because the youths don't know of this past. Unless they appreciate the history, they will never accept it. But we just need to put things in perspective. We need to, first, our sporting bodies we have to have clubs, and we have to be attached communities. For me, that's some of the steps. Our schools have to start having the inter-school competitions again. I think sports is a good rallying going, a good way of creating that sense of community again. The churches have to come more involved, because I think on a whole, our society is kind of failing, because a lot of the pillars that brought us up, even if as far back as we gotta look as a people, what some of the rough things that we've gone through, such as slavery, which is a topic that we don't like to preach. What brought us up to that would have been music, leadership, church. These are some of the pillars, and these are a lot of the pillars that are failing now. And family.
My name is Darrell Lloyd, and I'm an education officer in the Ministry of Education. Volunteerism has a meaningful and positive impact on the development of any country. For me, volunteerism is basically giving of your time, your skills, and your energy freely. Volunteerism is basically networking opportunities. For me, I have gained quite a lot because I have been able to make quite a number of friends and create a network of working colleagues because of volunteerism. When I find that I am bogged down or locked in with the daily routines of my work, I use the opportunity to be very much involved in volunteer work. Volunteerism creates a balance for me. It also gives me the opportunity to release myself from any stress and also the opportunity to lend of my expertise to any organization. I would want to encourage you as much as possible to become very much involved in volunteer work. Give, gain, grow. Volunteer.
My name is Sharon Cannonier and I am a volunteer. Why do I volunteer? Well, mainly because I get the chance to just give back to my community and help others who may need my assistance. I have been a volunteer for about 11 years with the St. Kitts Nevis Red Cross Society and with the Ministry of Youth Empowerment for 5 years. I have counseled youths on peer pressuring and also HIV/AIDS. What I would say to persons who would like to volunteer, do it. It's an opportunity to mix with different people from creeds and culture. You also gain experiences to give back to your community and you can also grow. So volunteer. Give, gain, grow. Volunteer.
I don't think Cuba created my perspective per se. I think a lot of what I have now was instilled in me from young. But Cuba may have guided that in one way. And again, I think my experience in Cuba gave me another perspective. For example, everybody will talk to you about the media and what the media does to you and how the media tends to rein in your vision. Cuba was the first place I actually saw the other side of the coin. Like, you know, I've never heard anybody say the US was bad and these were some of the clandestine things that the US was doing and the CIA. They was the first place I ever saw that. And so I guess it afforded me that other perspective, that other side of the coin, and it opened up my eyes. But apart from that, I think just before I left, I was getting a bit monotonous. Just sports, just the mundane things of life. And it forced me to sacrifice and, increase my value or allowed me to revalue life and the things important in it. So I think that's what basically what studying in Cuba did to me. I went to the basketball school. I didn't go to Beach Island, which is a new entity. I went to the basketball school. I was the Victoria Road and girls' school higher up. And I remember getting into grade 5 and grade 6. And for the first time having male teachers. And for somebody that grew up in a home with just a mother, and I think that had a unique influence on my life. Because for the first time I was able to relate to an intelligent, articulate man that was basically looking out for me. So there were some of the teachers that had a unique impression on me from an early age. Then I went on to junior high school. That again is an entity that no longer exists. Then to the Bastille High. Then I think we were the last to wear grey because the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College was established, but Bastille High School still holds the 6th form. So I think, we would have been the last to wear the grey. So we grade 6B and 6A. Worked for 2 years and then I went off to Cuba 1998. I studied medicine in Cuba, spent 7 years there. 7, I would think, wonderful years. Came back in 2005, had a stint at the JNF, did rotations there. And then in 2006, I was sent to the district, which is community health, which is more preventative health, which is again more what they practice in Cuba, because Cuba has universal health care. The government is totally in charge of health care. They're a socialist country. So a lot of what I do, or should be doing in the district, is what I would be familiar with. When I came back in 2005, as I mentioned before, the Basai was my alma mater, and I remember going to Basai, and I loved basketball from the time I was exposed to it, but I was never ever good enough to make the team. And so the team held up very, for me it was like a goal. And I came back and I realized I didn't have a team at high school, and a team that was involved in the SCABA. And for me that was a letdown, because I know what it pushed me to do as a student. So we started coaching them. But then I had an interesting experience in that I think it was during the new surge of this gang activity. And then what I realized is that most of the better basketball players were gang affiliated, or guys from Newtown, Knight area, Market Street area. And then what happened is, in the end, the team, there was a tier, and you find that only guys from the West were coming to the team, because it was during that heightened period. So next, I'm there coaching, and I realize there's only certain guys coming to practice. So whereas I wanted to just have a Bassi high school team, I think the focus of the team started to be basically seen as an intervention for these young men, because it was just these guys that was always involved in violence. But for me, that was not my aim. But in that's what it became. And for somebody that grew up, and for me, I was always a nerd in school, so skipping classes and that kind of bad behavior in school wasn't a part of me. So it was for me, it was different. Like, you knew of it because you grew up in these areas and you heard about gangs, but to be interacting with young men, it was a unique experience for me, and it was far different than I thought it was, because for me, I commanded a respect with them, and for me, it gave me an experience to understand how our system was failing our youths. In that, again, people like to say, all right, you came from Mac Night and you came from Market Street and you become a doctor, and that's something great. I never saw that as something great, because I always knew that, my parents always knew that I had, when it comes to books, I was always doing well in school. So for me, it's not a big surprise that you go on, irrespective of where you come from. I think with good parenting, irrespective of where you come from, the possibilities are endless. But when you grow up in a system where everybody pushes you to be bright, pushes you to excel in school and load up information and regurgitate it, and you find yourself being out of the bracket with that, you feel lost, and you act out, and then after you act out, you're shunned and you're disregarded. So I could see where a lot of these young men chose the road that they chose, and then not having that support of parenting or that support of a community. Because I think I had everything that every advantage that was needed to push me to excel. And for these young men, I didn't think so, because for some of them, they had irregular parenting. They weren't excelling in school as people would like them to. Some of them were violent because they grew up in violent homes, and they only knew violence. A lot of them didn't know love. They didn't know what it is to be respected. So I think within that team structure, they were able to get it, and some of them excelled and some didn't, but that's life on our own. But then again, I think having that first experience, first and coming back, stayed me a lot. And I always tell people, like, people always think that I have some political aspiration because I give back, but I don't give back because I have political aspirations. I give back because I'm a product of persons giving back. So if persons give back and I'm a product of that, then I just have to give back. It just becomes natural. My father wasn't there in the home. I knew of him, I knew exactly where to find him. He and my mother were not together. But I think I had lots of father figures. I had teachers that intervened. And like I said, there were men in the community that you would see and identify with. You wouldn't necessarily have to have an ongoing relationship with them, but you would see them doing the right things, and men like that always stood out. The men that were, supporting their families, the men that were doing the right thing, the men that were hard working. You could identify them. You didn't have to necessarily have a relationship with them, but they were there as examples. I think a father is important. Yeah, I don't think a woman could raise a child on her own, because I don't think my mother raised me on my own. I can tell you there were examples. There were men that came into my life as friends, as teachers, scout leaders. All of that for me was intervention. Of course, I influenced my relationship with my daughter, because all that you were missing and all that you didn't have, you want to now give. Consider everybody a role model. I think, like I said before, I think our best sermon is example, and we're all imperfect. I think I'm imperfect and I have my flaws, but I think I mean well. And I don't think life should be a popularity competition. And I think life is meant for you to offend a certain person, and a certain person I wouldn't quite necessarily never be offended because they don't believe or don't agree with some of the things that you, or they don't stand for some of the things that you stand for. I think what we do sometimes is we want to get along with everybody, and we just can't. If you're a boss, then your job is to boss people. If you're a supervisor, your job is to supervise. And that would mean certain persons won't get away with the things that they normally get away with. And that would quite necessarily make them your enemy. If I see myself as a role model, I think it doesn't matter how I see myself. Sometimes, even when you don't want to be, you are. Like, I remember growing up in the NBA, Charles Barkley had a popular commercial going where he said he's not a role model, but it's not his choice, and so it's not my choice. I think whether I want to be or not, certain persons are going to see me as a role model and take me as a role model. So it's for me to act accordingly. I basically think that St. Kitts is at a point where we have to think of nation. We have to see what we can do for St. Kitts and not so much what St. Kitts can do for us. I think we're at a point where the possibilities are endless, and we might not have everything, but we have enough. We definitely have to make the focus family and community again, because there's been an erosion of community, and we just definitely have to work on that. But it has to be, can't be passive, it has to be actively doing it. And I think sometimes we depend too much on leadership, and we don't realize the importance of each one of us. Because it doesn't take leadership to do the right thing. Your leader doesn't tell you how to do the right thing. Most times that's innate, and we just have to do the right thing. My name is Dr. Garfield Alexander, and this has been my story. Thank you.